Welcome to the Sleepless Historian. If you enjoy these calming journeys through time, consider liking and subscribing. And remember to turn on loop, so this gentle exploration repeats for your comfort. Waha! Picture yourself in a cozy room, dim lights casting soft shadows, a warm blanket enveloping your shoulders. Take a moment to adjust your pillow, allowing it to cradle your head just right. Breathe slowly and deeply, inhaling calmness, exhaling any tension. In. And today, we will embark on a remarkably mundane journey into the world of medieval town criers, specifically focusing on the intricate and often overlooked regulations regarding their volume. It may seem a dreadful topic, a tale of little excitement. Yet, within this seemingly trivial matter lies a tapestry of daily life and local governance. The sound of a town crier's voice was a critical part of community life. It was their duty to announce news, to declare events, and to share important information with townsfolk. However, the regulation of their volume was a matter taken quite seriously. Town criers were required to strike a delicate balance. They needed to be heard, of course, but not to disturb the peace of the community. Imagine the painstaking efforts of local authorities as they drafted guidelines. Just the right decibel level, loud enough to reach the ears of passers-by, but soft enough to avoid undue alarm. These regulations often specified exact measurements. The town council would discuss, debate, and decide upon the volume that would be deemed appropriate. So, as we delve deeper into this history, we will uncover the specifics of the procedures involved, the etiquette expected from a town crier, and how these seemingly dull regulations shape the rhythms of daily life. So, settle in, allow your breathing to slow, and prepare to float gently through this little-known aspect of history. Let us explore the soft whispers of the past, little by little, and discover the routines that govern the art of announcing news in a medieval town. To appreciate the delicate art of volume regulation within the realm of medieval town criers, we must first consider their essential tools. The town crier was often equipped with a bell, a simple yet effective instrument. This bell was typically crafted from brass or bronze, materials cherished for their durability and resonance. The sound it produced was not just an announcement, it was a signal, a call to attention that could echo through cobbled streets and alleyways. The size of the bell varied, but it was not uncommon for these bells to weigh between 5 and 10 pounds. A smaller bell might produce a softer tone, while a larger one could create a deeper, more resonant sound. The crier would hold the bell in one hand, while the other hand was often used to gesture, emphasizing the announcements made. The ropes used to ring the bell were usually made from sturdy hemp or flax, allowing for a firm grip and a reliable pull. The ropes would be maintained with care, ensuring they did not fray or wear out over time. Each crier had their own method for ringing the bell, some preferring a gentle chime, while others opted for a more vigorous approach. This variation in technique was part of the personal style of each crier and contributed to their individual charm. In addition to the bell, the town crier often carried a scroll. This scroll was made from parchment, which was crafted from animal skin, dried and stretched to create a smooth writing surface. It was customary for the crier to prepare announcements in advance. The script was usually written in a clear, legible hand, making it easy to read at a glance. Each scroll could contain several announcements, carefully organized and prioritized based on urgency. The crier would often store these scrolls in a leather satchel, which was worn slung across the shoulder. This satchel was not merely functional. It was often adorned with the emblem of the town, a gentle reminder of the authority and responsibility that rested upon the crier's shoulders. As we reflect on the day-to-day duties of the town crier, we can envision the rhythm of their daily schedule. Most town criers would begin their day at dawn. As the first light of morning touched the rooftops, they would prepare their announcements, reviewing each scroll methodically. This preparation could take anywhere from half an hour to an hour, depending on the number of messages to deliver and their significance. Once ready, the crier would step into the town square, where they would often begin their rounds. The schedule was not arbitrary. It was meticulously planned to ensure that important news reached the townsfolk at optimal times. For example, announcements about market days would be made early, allowing merchants and customers to prepare for trade. Etiquette played a crucial role in the crier's day. Before ringing their bell, a crier would typically assess the atmosphere of the town. They would listen to the sounds of morning, the calls of merchants setting up their stalls, the laughter of children beginning their day, and the distant sounds of laborers preparing for work. All of this contributed to the mood of the moment. In Walth, when the moment felt right, the crier would lift their bell and ring it gently, allowing the sound to flow through the air. This initial chime served as an invitation. The townsfolk would turn their attention, and the crier would clear their throat, pausing for a brief moment. This pause was respectful, allowing listeners to prepare themselves for the news about to be shared. Once the crier had gathered the attention of the crowd, they would read from their scroll. The volume of their voice was carefully modulated, a practice that was both an art and a science. The crier needed to project their voice clearly, allowing the sound to travel, while also ensuring it remained pleasant and non-intrusive. Volume regulations varied from town to town. Some communities adopted strict guidelines, specifying that a crier's voice should not exceed a certain decibel level. This was often measured in a unique way, utilizing common objects as reference points. A voice deemed too loud could be compared to the sound of a horse's neigh, while an appropriate volume might be likened to the soft rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. Nshi Wundikindai. Oh, ah. The crier, aware of these standards, would practice their delivery, repeating their lines softly at first, then gradually increasing their volume until they found the sweet spot. This practice not only ensured compliance with local regulations, but also refined their skills in modulation and tone. After delivering the announcements, the crier would often take a moment to listen, gauging the reactions of the crowd. This feedback was vital. If people seemed confused or distracted, the crier might repeat themselves, adjusting their volume as needed. If the information was well received, they would continue, moving to the next location, their footsteps echoing softly on the cobblestones. Throughout the day, a town crier would cover various areas, from bustling marketplaces to quiet residential streets. Each location presented its own challenges. In the market, the cacophony of voices and the clattering of carts could drown out even the loudest announcement. Here, the crier would need to adapt, often raising their voice slightly, while still adhering to the unwritten rules of volume control. Whoa. Conversely, in quieter neighborhoods, such as those near churches or gardens, a softer, more melodic tone was appropriate. Here, the crier might opt for a gentle approach, allowing their words to flow like a soft stream, creating a sense of calm as they delivered news of local events or celebrations. Each shift in volume was a careful negotiation, balancing the need to be heard with the desire to maintain peace. The life of a town crier was filled with routine, yet every announcement held the potential for connection. When news of a local engagement or a festival was proclaimed, the crier would see smiles, nods, and sometimes even cheers. This sense of community was the heart of their work, a shared experience that transcended the mere delivery of information. As the day drew to a close, the crier would return to their starting point, often the town square. Here, they would reflect on the day's events, taking a moment to relax after hours of announcing. Their bell would be set aside, and the leather satchel would be unburdened of its scrolls. As they settled in, perhaps with a warm cup of tea or a simple meal, they would think of the volume regulations that guided their work. These were not just rules. They were a part of the delicate dance of daily life. Little by little, they shaped the soundscape of the medieval town, creating a rhythm that was both soothing and essential, guiding the community through each day. And so, we can see how the seemingly mundane task of regulating volume transformed the role of the town crier. It was a process, a routine, and a gentle reminder to all of the balance between communication and tranquility. As we drift deeper into this history, let us continue to breathe slowly, allowing the soft echoes of the past to lull us into a state of calm. Encerning the oh, as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden hue over the medieval town, the role of the crier took on an even deeper significance. With the day's activities winding down, the crier's announcements became woven into the fabric of the evening routine. Each announcement was a melody of measured tones, carefully articulated to adhere to the volume regulations that had been established over time. It was not merely about the content of the message, but the way it was conveyed, the very decibel level of the sound resonating in the air. To regulate volume effectively, the town crier utilized a simple yet effective tool, a handbell. This bell, often crafted from brass or bronze, was polished regularly to maintain its clarity and resonance. The crier would hold it firmly, adjusting their grip to find the optimal angle. The size of the bell varied slightly from town to town, but most measured around 6 to 8 inches in diameter. Its shape was designed to carry sound through the bustling streets, yet it was essential for the crier to gauge the right intensity. The specifics of sound waves, after all, could be tricky, depending on the surroundings. In addition to the bell, the crier carried a leather satchel. This satchel was crafted from soft, supple leather, worn from years of use. It was not merely a vessel for scrolls. It was a part of the crier's identity. Inside, neatly rolled scrolls were carefully stored, each holding the news of the day, written in a clear, legible hand. The ink used was a deep black, made from soot and water, to ensure it stood out against the parchment of the scrolls. The crier would begin their day by waking early, just before dawn, the air still cool and crisp. They would take a moment to prepare, gathering their tools and materials. The bell would be inspected for any signs of wear, a quick polish applied to brighten its surface. The scrolls would be organized, the most urgent news placed at the top, ready to be unfurled at a moment's notice. This preparation usually took about 30 minutes, a quiet time for the crier to center themselves before stepping into the lively streets. Once ready, the crier would make their way to the town square, a journey that took approximately 15 minutes. The streets would be empty at this hour, save for a few early risers. As they walked, they would practice their announcements softly, focusing on the tone and volume. The cadence of their speech was important. It needed to be clear, but not overwhelming. The gentle rhythm of their voice echoed softly against the cobblestones, a reassuring sound in the stillness of the morning. Upon reaching the square, the crier would pause for a moment, taking in the surroundings. The sun would just begin to rise, casting long shadows across the buildings. They would take a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill their lungs. Then, with a steady hand, they would raise the bell. The first announcement of the day would begin, a soft chime ringing out as they called for attention. Each announcement was carefully calibrated, always mindful of the volume regulations. These regulations were not arbitrary. They were set by the town council, reflecting the need for balance. The crier would often recall the instructions given to them, passed down through generations. It was not just a matter of volume, but also a question of respect. Too loud, and they risked disturbing the peaceful morning. Too soft, and the important news would go unheard. The optimal volume was determined to be just above the ambient noise, yet gentle enough to be soothing. As the day progressed, there would be several scheduled announcements, often at regular intervals. The crier would stand in the square at each designated time, maintaining a schedule that the townsfolk had come to expect. Every hour, on the hour, the crier would announce the time, followed by significant news such as market days, public gatherings, or local events. These announcements were brief, typically lasting no longer than a minute. During market days, the crier would be particularly vigilant. The market was bustling, full of vendors selling their wares. Here, the crier's volume needed to be slightly elevated, yet still controlled. They would scan the crowd, noting how the sound carried through the throngs of people. Adjustments would be made, subtle shifts in their stance, the angle of the bell, and the modulation of their voice. This practice was refined over time, a skill honed through experience and an understanding of the community's unique soundscape. Now, after the announcements, the crier would often engage with townsfolk. This interaction was essential, as it helped to build relationships within the community. They would listen to feedback on their volume, often asking, "Was that clear enough?" or "Did you hear me well?" The responses varied, but each piece of feedback was noted and taken to heart. The crier understood the delicate balance that they maintained, an invisible thread connecting sound and silence. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting longer shadows, the crier would prepare for the evening's announcements. This was a quieter time, as the hustle and bustle of the day started to fade. The crier would take a moment to reflect on the day's events. The leather satchel would be checked once again, ensuring that all scrolls were in order, each message clear and precise. The bell would be given one final polish, ensuring that it would shine brightly as the sun set. It was a ritual, a moment of care and respect for the tools of their trade. The crier would take a deep breath, letting the air flow slowly in and out, feeling the rhythm of the evening settle around them. When the time came for the final announcements of the day, the crier would ascend to their usual spot in the square. With a gentle ringing of the bell, they would call for attention. The volume, as always, would be carefully modulated, a soft yet clear chime that resonated through the twilight air. This was not just a task to check off. It was a connection to the people, a reassurance that as night fell, they were all still part of the same community. Little by little, the importance of these moments became apparent. The sound of the crier's voice, the gentle tolling of the bell, carried with it a promise of continuity, a reminder of the shared experience that was both calming and essential. The volume regulations were not merely rules. They were a reflection of a deeper understanding of the community's rhythm, a rhythm that echoed softly through the cobbled streets and into the hearts of the townsfolk. Was. Wow. The crier, once settled into their appointed space, would take a moment to observe the gathering crowd. Each face, illuminated by flickering lantern light, held a unique expression. Some were curious, while others appeared expectant. The crier would take another deep breath, inhaling the cool evening air, and start to prepare their voice. It was a subtle art, this modulation of sound. The volume had to be just so, not too loud to disturb the evening peace, yet not too soft to be unheard. Uh, why not? To regulate this sound, the crier relied on their own experience and a few simple tools. One might think of a bell as merely a signal, but it was so much more. It was a tool of communication. The crier would often carry a small handheld bell, made of polished brass or bronze, and it would emit a clear cutting sound. This bell served as a guide, a gentle cue for the townsfolk to shift their attention. The crier would ring it softly, just 3 or 4 times, allowing the sound to resonate in the evening air. The pitch of the bell was important, for it needed to be pleasant yet firm. The crier would often check the bell before each announcement, giving it a gentle shake, listening for any imperfections in its tone. If the bell were tarnished, it might produce a dull sound, and the crier understood that every detail mattered. A tarnished bell could lead to misunderstandings. So, every now and then, the crier would carefully polish the surface with a soft cloth, ensuring the brass gleamed under the lantern light. As the crier prepared to speak, they took into account the distance to the furthest listener. On occasions when the square filled with townsfolk, the crier would assess the space, estimating the distance to the edges of the crowd. It was a simple calculation, but crucial to their role. If the square were crowded, the crier would adjust their technique accordingly, drawing on the years of experience to project their voice just right. The crier would often think of the materials they used on a daily basis. Their attire reflected their status, a well-fitted coat that was easily noticeable, often adorned with a badge or emblem denoting their role. This coat served not only to signify their position, but also to offer warmth against the evening chill. The fabric would be a sturdy wool or laurel linen, chosen for its durability. A crumpled paper scroll, containing the evening's announcements, would be tucked neatly in a pocket, ready to be unfurled when the moment arrived. Nay, added back and more. The crier understood the importance of routine. There was a schedule to follow, a rhythm that was well known to all. Each evening, just as the sun began to set, the crier would arrive at the square, often a half hour before the scheduled time. This allowed for adjustments to be made, ensuring everything was just right. The townsfolk, too, followed their own routines, gathering in small groups, exchanging quiet pleasantries, creating a sense of togetherness that filled the air with warmth. Shai Moru, me. Once the crier had taken their position, they would take a moment to observe those gathered. They could see familiar faces, those whose presence brought comfort. There were the regulars who always stood in the same spot, leaning against the stone fountain. Then there were the newcomers, shyly finding their way into the crowd. The crier would feel a gentle smile forming, knowing that their voice would bridge the gap between these different lives, creating a moment of unity in the cooling air. Hey! Before speaking, the crier would gently clear their throat, allowing the sound to echo softly. This was a subtle cue, a reminder to the townsfolk that the time for announcements had come. The well-practiced sound was neither jarring nor abrupt. Instead, it flowed like a gentle stream through the square. It was this very act of clearing the throat that signified a transition from silence to sound, a momentary pause that drew the eyes of the people toward the crier. Now, with the bell ringing softly, the crier would begin to speak. Their voice, modulated with care, would rise and fall, each word chosen for clarity and calmness. The announcements were varied. Some were about community events, others shared news from the surrounding countryside. Each announcement was delivered with attention to volume, ensuring that the message would reach the farthest ears without overwhelming the senses. The crier would speak slowly, allowing each word to settle in the minds of the listeners. There would be a deliberate pacing to their speech, a natural cadence that gave the townsfolk time to absorb the information. If a particular announcement required emphasis, the crier would adjust their tone slightly, softening or deepening their voice, yet always remaining within the bounds of the established volume regulations. T. These regulations, often set by local authorities, were not merely strict guidelines. They were community agreements. The townsfolk understood that too much noise could disrupt the tranquility of their evening. Thus, the crier adhered to a specific decibel level, usually around 60 decibels, comparable to the sound of a normal conversation. The crier would know this level by heart, instinctively adjusting their voice to maintain that soothing sound, creating an atmosphere of calm. As the announcements continued, the crier would occasionally glance at the scroll in their hand, ensuring that all pertinent details were shared. Each announcement would finish with a gentle, concluding phrase, often a reminder or a call to action. The crier understood that this was not merely a duty, but a shared moment of connection. After the final announcement, the crier would ring the bell once more, another soft chime that resonated in the twilight. This sound would signal the end of the evening's declarations, and the townsfolk would slowly disperse, carrying with them the warmth of the shared experience, the bonds of community strengthened by these gentle rituals. The crier would then take a moment to observe the emptying square, the echoes of their voice lingering in the air. They would gather their materials, folding the scroll carefully, storing it away for the next day. The bell, now silent, would rest in its place, awaiting the next evening when it would once again chime softly against the backdrop of the setting sun. In this way, little by little, the crier would step down from their elevated position, returning to the life of the town, knowing that each sound, each word, and each regulation served a purpose, creating harmony, fostering connection, and quietly ensuring that the heart of the community continued to beat steadily, even as the day drew to a close. And now, day. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting soft shadows upon cobblestone streets, the crier would prepare for the evening's announcements with quiet precision. Each day, this preparation was a ritual, a careful arrangement of tools and materials, a methodical approach to ensure clarity and regulation. The first task involved gathering the scrolls, parchment that had been meticulously crafted from fine linen, chosen for its durability and ease of writing. The crier would roll each scroll, ensuring that every message was neatly inscribed in delicate ink, a mixture of soot and water, which had been ground to a fine consistency. This ink, smooth and dark, flowed from a quill fashioned from a goose feather. The crier had learned to dip the quill just so, allowing the ink to saturate the tip without causing it to drip. Each letter was formed with care, each word chosen thoughtfully, creating a tapestry of news that would soon dance upon the evening air. The scrolls, once completed, were secured with a simple piece of twine, a length of soft, natural fiber, which held the gathered parchment tightly. This twine would be wrapped around the scroll and tied with a gentle knot, ensuring that nothing would escape before it was announced. After gathering the scrolls, the crier would then turn to their bell, that sacred instrument of announcement. The bell, crafted from a mix of bronze and copper, had a rounded body that shimmered faintly in the fading light. It was important to inspect the bell for any signs of wear or damage, as even the slightest imperfection could alter its sound. The crier would lift the bell, feeling its weight in their hand, and test its tone with a gentle strike using the wooden clapper. The sound was a rich, melodious chime, a note that resonated through the air, announcing to all that the time for gathering was near. This moment was crucial, for the sound of the bell served as a gentle reminder, a soft invitation for townsfolk to pause their daily tasks and listen. Once the bell was prepared, the crier would then choose a suitable spot in the town square. Location was key. It needed to be a place where the echoes of their voice would carry, yet not disturb the peace of the neighboring homes. The crier would stand upon a small platform, carefully constructed from sturdy wood, elevated just enough to be seen by all. This platform was often adorned with simple decorations, perhaps a few wildflowers gathered from nearby fields, which added a touch of warmth to the otherwise mundane space. With the scrolls secured and the bell ready, the crier would take a moment to breathe deeply, inhaling the crisp evening air. This moment of quiet reflection was essential, a chance to prepare not just the body, but the mind. Little by little, the crier would remind themselves of the importance of their role, the significance of each announcement, and the connection fostered through the act of sharing news. Now, as the time for the first chime approached, the crier would glance at the horizon, noting the colors that danced in the sky, a soft orange and pink melding into deep purples. This would mark the perfect moment for the first bell toll, a gentle signal that the day was drawing to a close. With each tick of the clock, the crier would feel the anticipation build, not in a rush or excitement, but in the calm, steady pulse of routine. Yes. When the hour arrived, the crier would lift the bell, cradling it in their hands before bringing the clapper into contact with the surface. The sound would resonate softly, a single clear note that rang out across the square. As the echo faded, the crier would call out the first announcement, their voice steady and calm, projecting the words with clarity. The townsfolk would lean in, drawn closer by the soothing cadence of the crier's tone. The announcements varied from day to day, with some evenings dedicated to local news, while others focused on upcoming markets or festivities. Each announcement was crafted to be brief yet informative. The crier would often pause between messages, allowing the townsfolk to absorb the information before continuing. These pauses were not merely empty spaces. They were moments of reflection, allowing the community to connect to the news being shared. As the crier moved from one scroll to the next, they would gently unfurl each parchment, taking care not to tear the delicate paper. The scrolls would be held in one hand, while the other would guide the eyes along the lines of text, ensuring every word was pronounced with intention. The townsfolk listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to understanding, and sometimes to joy or concern, depending on the news. After several announcements, the crier would take a moment to adjust their stance, shifting weight from one foot to the other, feeling the earth beneath them. Each evening, this rhythmic motion became part of the process, a grounding movement that connected them to the square and the people gathered before them. The crier understood the importance of this connection, a bond created through shared moments of information and community spirit. When the final announcement was made, the crier would carefully roll up the last scroll, ensuring it was placed precisely in the soft leather satchel that hung at their side. This satchel was worn but well cared for, its edges softened from years of handling. Inside, it housed not only the scrolls, but also a small cloth, which the crier would use to gently polish the bell after each use. This act of maintenance was vital, as the crier believed that a well-cared-for bell would produce the most pleasing sound, resonating with the essence of the community. As the crowd began to disperse, the crier would take a moment to observe the familiar faces. Each smile, each nod of acknowledgement, felt like a small reward for their efforts. The crier understood that the role was not merely about announcing news, but also about fostering a sense of belonging, creating a space where every voice mattered, even in the stillness of the evening. With the square now quieter, the crier would gather their things, placing the scrolls into the satchel with care. The remaining light began to fade, and the air turned cool against the skin. The crier would take a deep breath, inhaling the soft scent of evening flowers and damp earth. Each breath would remind them of the day's purpose, the small yet significant impact of their voice echoing through the square. The bell, now resting in its place, would await the next evening's announcements, its surface reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Little by little, the crier would take their leave of the square, walking slowly down the cobblestone path, each step deliberate, each breath steady. The day had come to a gentle close, and the rhythm of life continued in the quietude of the night, a soft lullaby that would carry on until the dawn. Why? As the crier made their way home, the weight of the satchel felt familiar. Inside were the scrolls, each one carefully rolled and tied with a simple piece of twine. The twine was often sourced from the local market, a sturdy yet flexible material that was affordable, usually costing just a few pence for a generous length. This twine was essential, as it kept the scrolls secure and prevented them from unfurling unexpectedly. Each scroll contained neatly written news, inked in a steady hand, often using a quill fashioned from a feather. The quill had to be replenished regularly, as the ink would dry up, leaving the crier with the task of dipping the quill into a small inkwell. The inkwell, a small glass pot, sat on the crier's desk, along with a collection of parchment pieces. The parchment had various textures, some rough and some smooth. The crier would select the parchment based on how important the news was. Important announcements would often be written on the smoother sheets, as they presented the ink beautifully. The ink, a deep black, was made from a combination of soot and gum, ground together until they formed a rich liquid that flowed easily from the tip of the quill. The crier's desk was modest, with a sturdy wooden surface, worn from years of use. It was positioned near a window that let in ample light during the day, but was covered with a simple cloth at nightfall. Each evening, before heading to the square, the crier would spend a moment preparing, ensuring that the scrolls were in order. The most pressing news would be at the top, unrolled carefully to avoid creasing, so that the words would flow smoothly during delivery. Slowly and gently, the crier would review each scroll, allowing the familiar words to settle in their mind. The crier also maintained a small wooden bell, a cherished tool that hung from a simple hook beside the desk. This bell was not merely decorative. It served as a signal to gather attention. The crier had learned that the tone and volume of the bell mattered significantly. Too soft, and it would not be heard. Too loud, and it would startle the townsfolk. Finding the right balance became an art, a delicate dance of sound that required practice. Each time the crier would ring the bell, they made a note of the volume. The sound echoed softly through the square, a gentle chime that called for ears to listen. The townsfolk had grown accustomed to the bell's tone, and it became a part of their routine, like the rising and falling of the sun. The crier followed a simple yet effective schedule. Arriving at the square just as the sun dipped below the horizon, they would take a moment to observe the surroundings. The cobblestones, worn smooth by the passage of countless feet, glimmered with a hint of dust. The local baker would be setting out the last of the day's bread, its fresh scent wafting gently through the air. The crier always made a habit of greeting the baker, exchanging pleasantries about the day's bread, and perhaps even a small loaf in exchange for the news, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Yes, he may. With the scrolls tucked securely in the satchel, the crier would head toward the central market square. The layout of the square was familiar, with the fountain at its center, surrounded by small stalls that sold everything from herbs to cloth. Each vendor had a specific place, a routine established over the years. The crier, in their soft, measured way, would weave through the stalls, acknowledging familiar faces, sharing a smile, and gently ringing the bell to announce their presence. As the crier approached the designated spot, they would take a deep breath, inhaling the mixture of scents. Fresh bread, herbs, and the coolness of evening dew settling in. The townsfolk would begin to gather, forming a loose circle around the crier. Each person would take their place, finding a position that felt comfortable, leaning slightly forward, eager to hear the latest news. Now, the crier would gently unroll the first scroll. The familiar crackle of parchment breaking the evening stillness. They would begin speaking in a calm, steady voice, projecting just enough to reach the ears of those assembled. Each word was chosen carefully, ensuring clarity and precision. The crier understood the importance of volume. It was crucial to deliver the message without overwhelming the listeners. During the announcements, the crier would monitor the responses of the audience, adjusting their volume as needed. If they sensed a shift in attention, a slight raise in tone would guide the listeners back, while a softer tone would encourage them to lean in closer. This subtle ebb and flow of sound became almost melodic, creating a rhythm that soothed and engaged. It is ye, what I say. In this tranquil moment, the crier would remind themselves of the essence of their duty. The news was not just a collection of events. It was a thread weaving through the fabric of the community. The importance of timing, volume, and clarity was paramount, and little by little, the crier found a sense of fulfillment in their role. Each announcement was a reminder of shared experiences, milestones, and moments of joy. After the news was declared, the crier would roll up the scrolls once more, taking care to preserve the integrity of the parchment. The scrolls, once again secured by twine, were placed back into the satchel with reverent care. Silence would fall over the square for a moment, as the townsfolk absorbed the information, their faces reflecting the mixture of emotions that news can bring. The crier would take a moment to breathe, allowing the evening air to fill their lungs. This was a time for reflection, a pause to appreciate the connections forged through simple announcements. Each day, as the routine unfolded, It built a sense of continuity and familiarity that wrapped around the town like a gentle embrace. Mm. Now, they see. It is you. Why? As the last light faded and the moon began to rise, casting a silvery glow over the cobblestones, the crier would prepare to leave. Their footsteps echoed softly, the sound comforting in the stillness. Each step back home would be accompanied by the memories of the evening, the faces of those who listened, and the words exchanged. The weight of the satchel felt lighter now, filled with the essence of community rather than mere scrolls of news. Slowly and gently, the crier would walk the familiar path, the rhythm of their footsteps matching the pulse of the night. The sounds of the evening, soft rustles of leaves, the distant chatter of night creatures, would accompany them, wrapping around them like a soothing blanket. Each breath would deepen, each moment would stretch, creating a quiet symphony of life continuing in the embrace of darkness. As they arrived at home, the crier would set the satchel down carefully, placing it beside the desk where the inkwell awaited. The bell, now resting quietly, would also wait, eager for the next evening of news. The crier would take one last moment to appreciate the comfort of home, the gentle flicker of candlelight illuminating the small room, creating shadows that danced softly against the walls. In this nurturing space, the crier would reflect on the day's events, the importance of volume and clarity, and the simple joy of being a part of something larger. Each day, each evening, brought with it a sense of purpose, a rhythm that, little by little, became a cherished routine. In the quiet of the evening, as the sun tucked itself beneath the horizon, the town crier would prepare for another night of sharing the news. Each step of this preparation was methodical and soothing, a gentle routine that had been honed over many years. The crier would begin by gathering the essential tools of their trade, items that would create an atmosphere of calm and clarity. First, there was the bell itself, a small but resonant instrument crafted from polished brass. Its surface would gleam softly in the candlelight, reflecting the tranquil ambience of the room. The crier would pick it up gently, feeling its weight, which was just enough to be reassuring, but not burdensome. The bell had a handle, wrapped in a soft leather grip, comfortably fitting in the palm of the crier's hand. This small bell would be the herald of news, the signal for attention, and it was crucial to ensure the right volume for the occasion. Next, the crier would reach for the satchel. This satchel, made from sturdy leather, bore the marks of many journeys. It was expertly stitched, with a thick strap that hung easily over the shoulder. Inside the satchel lay neatly folded sheets of parchment, each one inscribed with news and announcements, handwritten in careful, legible script. The ink, a deep black made from soot and gum, dried slowly, giving the crier time to reflect on each word as they wrote. Din. The parchment itself was often made from the fibers of flax or hemp, a coarse material that held the ink well, ensuring clarity with each stroke of the quill. Each sheet measured approximately 8 by 12 inches, a size that was easy to handle while standing in the town square. The crier would store the parchment flat in the satchel, careful to avoid any creasing that might obscure the message. With the tools gathered, the crier would take a moment to check the ink supply in the inkwell. This small vessel, usually carved from wood or stone, held the precious liquid that made communication possible. The crier would dip a quill into the well, the soft sound of the nib sliding through the ink, releasing a gentle sigh of satisfaction. The quill would be made from a goose feather, its tip carefully shaped to allow for fine lines and smooth strokes, enabling the crier to write clearly and beautifully. Ian, Ye may. When all was prepared, the crier would glance at a simple clock, a wooden timepiece with a pendulum that swung back and forth in a quiet rhythm. The clock would strike the hour softly, reminding the crier that it was time to begin their rounds. The crier would take a deep breath, filling their lungs, feeling the air cool and refreshing. This was the moment to center themselves, to embrace the tranquility of the night. Slowly and gently, the crier would step outside, the door creaking softly as it swung open. The night air, fresh and crisp, would envelop them. The streets of the town were familiar, each cobblestone worn smooth by countless footsteps. The crier would walk at a measured pace, their footsteps echoing softly, a calming rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the town. As they walked, the crier would pass by familiar sights. The baker's shop, its windows fogged with warmth, would send the inviting aroma of fresh bread wafting into the night. A glance at the clock above the door would reveal the time, and the crier would note that the baker would still be hard at work, crafting loaves for the early risers. The crier could sense the warmth and comfort that such routines brought to the community. So, one day, continuing onward, the crier would reach the town square, a central gathering place where the townsfolk often congregated, exchanging stories and laughter. Here, the crier would pause for a moment, taking in the scene. Lanterns hung from posts, their gentle flicker casting a soft, golden light that danced on the cobbles. The crier would raise the bell gently and strike it once, just a soft, clear note that pierced the stillness without jarring the senses. This was the signal, the gentle call to gather. As the townsfolk approached, the crier would stand tall and composed, ensuring that their posture conveyed authority and calm. The crier knew that the volume of their voice was just as important as the words they would speak. Too loud, and the crowd might recoil. Too soft, and the message might be lost. Therefore, the crier would take a moment to breathe, allowing the stillness to settle around them. With a measured tone, the crier would begin to read from the parchment, the words flowing smoothly, each syllable pronounced distinctly. Hear ye, they would say, their voice a soothing balm to the ears of those gathered. The cadence of the speech was deliberate, each phrase punctuated with pauses that allowed for reflection. The crier would lean forward slightly, projecting their voice without straining, maintaining a comfortable volume that wrapped around the listeners like a warm embrace. Is he? As the crier spoke, the townsfolk would listen attentively, their bodies relaxed yet engaged. Some would nod knowingly, while others would lean closer, eager to catch every word. The rhythm of the news would create a soft melody, a dance of language that echoed through the square, wrapping around each individual in a cocoon of understanding. When a particular announcement required emphasis, the crier would modulate their tone, softening or strengthening their voice as needed. It was a delicate balance, one that required practice and intuition. Each news item, be it a festival, a market day, or a simple reminder, was delivered with care. The crier understood the importance of clarity, of being heard without overwhelming the senses. Wow. After the announcements, the crier would allow a moment of silence, a space for the words to settle. The gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze would fill the air, accompanied by the distant sound of crickets. Slowly and gently, the crier would smile, allowing the townsfolk to absorb the information, to discuss among themselves, to share their thoughts. As the gathering began to disperse, the crier would watch the friendly exchanges, the nods of agreement, the laughter that punctuated the night. Each interaction was a testament to community, a reminder of the bonds forged through shared knowledge and understanding. With a feeling of contentment, the crier would prepare to make their way home, the satchel once again resting against their side, a weight that felt familiar and comforting. What? The crier would retrace their steps, feeling the cool earth beneath their feet, the rhythm of their walk harmonizing with the pulse of the night. Each street corner, each archway, was a symbol of the life that swelled around them. The crier would take another deep breath, inhaling the scents of the evening, perhaps a hint of wood smoke or the lingering sweetness of baked goods. Eoi. Upon arriving home, the crier would close the door softly behind them, sealing in the warmth of their small sanctuary. The quiet of the room welcomed them back, where the flicker of candlelight awaited, ready to illuminate the pages of the next day's news. The crier would set the bell gently on the table, its sound now a memory, a whisper of the evening's efforts, and with a content heart, they would prepare for rest. Anu, Chebimbe. In the quiet hours of the night, the town crier would reflect on the delicate balance required in their profession. The role of a town crier was not merely to announce news, but to do so with a mastery of volume, a skill that required practice and patience. Each morning, as the pale light broke over the horizon, the crier would prepare for the day ahead. They would gather their tools, the essentials of their trade, the instruments that would help them convey messages with clarity and purpose. Yeah, the crier's most important tool was their voice, a remarkable instrument honed over years of practice. To maintain their vocal strength, they would engage in gentle exercises, practicing soft tones and loud calls. Each exercise would last for about 10 minutes, a ritual that warmed the vocal cords, ensuring that when they stepped into the daylight, they would be heard without strain. The crier would often think of it as a morning symphony, their voice rising and falling, gradually acclimating to the day's demands. Alongside their voice, the crier required a sturdy bell, a symbol of their authority. The bell was crafted from polished brass, heavy and gleaming in the light. It would be kept in a small satchel, lined with soft leather to protect it from scratches. The weight of the bell was significant, a reminder of the responsibility it represented. Each time the crier rang the bell, it would produce a clear, resonant tone that carried through the streets, calling attention to their presence. The crier would take a moment each morning to polish the bell, ensuring it was bright and clean, reflecting their commitment to the craft. As the sun climbed higher, the crier would make their way to the central square where the townspeople gathered. They would arrive precisely at the appointed hour, which was usually just after the morning meal, a time when voices were still soft, and the air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread. The crier would set down their satchel, adjusting the straps to ensure comfort. They would then take a moment to survey the crowd, noting familiar faces and the curious expressions of newcomers. In this moment of stillness, they would breathe deeply, the rhythm of the town settling around them. When it was time to begin, the crier would ring the bell 3 times. This was the established etiquette, a signal that news was forthcoming. The sound would echo gently, inviting attention. The crier would then raise their voice, ensuring it was neither too loud nor too soft. The ideal volume was a subject of endless discussion among criers. Too loud, and they risked startling the listeners. Too soft, and the important words would be lost in the chatter of the day. Regulating volume was no simple task. The crier would often adjust their distance from the audience, taking a step forward to enhance projection or a step back to invite a softer tone on more delicate matters. They understood the subtleties of acoustics, the way sound carried through open spaces and bounced off walls. The crier would often experiment with different approaches, noting how the angle of their voice affected the reception of the news. The crier's schedule was carefully planned. Each day, they would be responsible for sharing updates on everything from local events to official decrees. They would keep a notebook, meticulously recording each piece of news. The notebook was a simple collection of parchment bound together, the pages filled with neat handwriting. Each entry would include the date, the source of the news, and any specific instructions on how to present it. This organization helped the crier maintain a clear flow, ensuring that each announcement followed a logical order, making it easier for the townsfolk to follow along. No, Yenjuri. After completing their announcements, the crier would often linger, engaging in brief conversations with the townspeople. These exchanges were short yet meaningful, an opportunity to connect and gauge the community's response to the news shared. The crier would listen attentively, noting how the information resonated with the audience, adjusting future deliveries based on the feedback received. As the day transitioned into evening, the crier would begin to wind down their activities. They would return home, allowing the day's events to settle gently in their mind. The process of reflection was important, a way to appreciate the nuances of their role and the impact of their voice. Once home, the crier would tend to their bell, placing it carefully back in its satchel. They would take care to smooth the leather, ensuring it remained supple and intact. This act of care was a ritual, a moment to acknowledge the trust placed in them by the community. The crier would then put away their notebook, storing it on a small shelf reserved for their tools of the trade. Each item had its place, a sense of order that mirrored the structured nature of their work. Before settling into the evening, the crier would prepare a light meal. Simple fare, often a bowl of porridge or a slice of bread with cheese. The act of preparation was soothing, a gentle reminder of the day's rhythm. They would stir the pot slowly, allowing the steam to rise, filling the air with warmth. Each bite was savored, a moment of nourishment that rejuvenated both body and mind. As night fell, the crier would dim the lights of their home, allowing the flicker of candlelight to dance across the walls. They would take a moment to breathe deeply, inhaling the calm that enveloped them. This was a time for quiet reflection, a chance to appreciate the simplicity of life, the beauty in the mundane. With the day's news settled in their heart, the crier would prepare for rest. They would lay their head gently upon their pillow, the softness cradling them as they drifted off into a peaceful sleep. Each night was a renewal, a reminder that tomorrow would bring new stories to share, new connections to forge. The crier would embrace the night, ready to awaken to another day of gentle announcements and harmonious exchanges, a life woven with the threads of community and communication. Nanui. As dawn approached, the town crier would awaken to the gentle light filtering through the window. The first task of the day was to rise slowly, stretching limbs in a calming manner, welcoming the soft warmth of the sun. The crier would begin their routine by washing their face with cool water, the refreshing sensation stirring the senses gently. This ritual, performed with care, set a rhythmic tone for the day ahead. After cleansing, the crier would dress in a simple but neat tunic, often made of wool, dyed in soft, muted colors. The fabric would be carefully chosen, for it was essential to convey a sense of professionalism while remaining comfortable. They would fasten the tunic with a leather belt, the slight tug and adjustment bringing a sense of readiness. Once dressed, the crier would secure a small pouch at their side, where they stored essential tools for the day ahead: an inkhorn, a quill, and a small worn notebook. The inkhorn would be filled with a dark, viscous liquid, carefully made from soot and water, mixed in just the right proportions. This ink, once applied to parchment, would create clear, legible marks, essential for the communication of news. The quill, taken from a goose or a raven, would be sharpened to a fine point, allowing for delicate strokes. Each tool had a purpose, each detail adding to the tapestry of their work. The crier would set these tools on a wooden table, a sturdy piece of furniture that had seen many seasons. As the morning light brightened, the crier would prepare a modest breakfast, perhaps some porridge gently cooked with a sprinkle of salt. The creamy texture would warm the belly, providing energy for the day. A slice of bread, often a coarse loaf made from rye, would accompany the meal. It was a simple breakfast, but one filled with sustenance. The crier would chew slowly, savoring each bite, allowing the moment to linger, as each taste was a reminder of the warmth of home. Following breakfast, the crier would take a moment to review notes from the previous day. The small notebook, worn and filled with the musings of the past, contained important messages and updates, carefully jotted down. Each entry was a piece of the community's history, a collection of voices waiting to be shared. The crier would read through these notes, their fingers tracing the lines, allowing the words to settle in their mind. Once prepared, the crier would step outside, the chill of the morning air brushing against their skin. They would pause for a moment, taking a deep breath, inhaling the scent of dew-kissed grass and the faint aroma of wood smoke from nearby homes. The sound of birds chirping filled the air, a soothing melody that accompanied their thoughts. As they walked through the cobbled streets, they would take note of the town's layout, the familiar paths leading to different corners. The crier would then arrive at the town square, the heart of the community. Here, they would gather with other townsfolk, engaging in gentle conversation. The square was often bustling, yet the atmosphere remained tranquil, with voices mingling softly. The crier would listen attentively to the whispers of gossip and news, absorbing every detail, for each piece of information was vital to their role. Narza! In this quiet space, the crier would prepare for the day's announcement, feeling the weight of responsibility resting lightly on their shoulders. They would stand at a designated spot, a small rise where their voice could carry, yet remain respectful of the listeners. The square was a canvas, painted with the colors of everyday life, and the crier was the brush that would share its story. I know it near. Before declaring the news, the crier would take a moment to calibrate their voice. This was an art, a gentle dance between loudness and softness. They would practice softly at first, allowing their voice to warm up, whispering the messages they wished to convey. Perhaps they would repeat the words, hear ye, in a soothing tone, focusing on the cadence that would draw the attention of passersby. The crier understood the importance of volume regulation. Speaking too loudly could startle the townsfolk, while speaking too softly might cause the message to be lost. They would take into consideration the size of the crowd, the weather conditions, and even the time of day. Each element played a role in the delicate balance of their announcements. The crier would keep in mind the etiquette of announcing news. It was customary to begin with a gentle greeting, offering a few moments of calm before sharing the day's updates. The crier would often say, "Good morning, dear friends," allowing the audience to settle into a serene atmosphere before the news unfolded. As the crier spoke, they would monitor the reactions of those around them. A slight nod or a gentle smile would indicate they were being heard. The crier would adjust their volume accordingly, ensuring that each person felt included in the moment. They would take care to vary their tone, allowing certain phrases to resonate, creating a rhythmic pattern that lulled the crowd into a state of calm attentiveness. Dow. Once the news was shared, the crier would take a step back, observing the community's response. It was a moment of connection, a shared experience that brought people together. The crier understood that these announcements were not merely words, they were the lifeblood of the community, weaving individuals into a tapestry of understanding. After the announcements were made, the crier would gather their tools once more, tucking the quill and ink horn back into their pouch. They would take a leisurely stroll through the market, where vendors displayed their goods with pride. The crier would pause at stalls filled with fresh produce, fragrant herbs, and handcrafted wares. Each stall was a reminder of the craftsmanship and dedication that flourished within the town. Wary, the crier would take a moment to greet the vendors, exchanging pleasantries that added a layer of warmth to the morning. "Good day, my friend," they would say, acknowledging the effort that went into every item displayed. The vendors would respond with soft smiles, grateful for the crier's recognition. This exchange was part of the day's rhythm, a gentle reminder of the bonds formed through simple interactions. Indianois. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the crier would return home, their heart full of the day's experiences. They would prepare a light lunch, perhaps a simple broth made from leftover vegetables, simmered slowly to enhance the flavors. The act of cooking was meditative, each ingredient added with care, each stir a gentle reminder of the nourishing aspects of life. After lunch, the crier would take a moment to rest, reclining on a comfortable chair, allowing the gentle breeze from the open window to soothe their senses. They would close their eyes for a brief moment, listening to the sounds of the town outside, the faint laughter of children playing, the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was a moment of peace, a chance to recharge for the next wave of announcements and community interactions that awaited them. The afternoon would unfold gently, with the crier often returning to the square for a second round of news. Each announcement was a chance to connect, a moment to foster understanding and camaraderie within the town. The crier understood that this was not just a job, but a calling, a duty that wove them into the very fabric of the community. And each day brought new stories, new connections, and the crier embraced every moment with a calm assurance. With every announcement, they shared not just words, but a piece of themselves, a piece of history that would linger long after the sounds faded into the air. Once, monsieur, as the afternoon sun began to shift, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets, the town crier would prepare for their next round. The tools of their trade were simple, yet effective. A wooden bell, polished smooth through years of use, hung from a sturdy leather strap. This bell was not merely an ornamental piece. It served a vital purpose. Its gentle chime would signal the beginning of an announcement, drawing the attention of townsfolk, whether they were tending to their gardens, kneading bread, or engaging in conversation. The bell was crafted from a rich, dark wood, its surface adorned with subtle carvings that told stories of the past. Each ring was carefully calibrated, ensuring that it would not startle the listeners, but would reach them kindly from a distance. The crier understood the importance of volume regulation. They would practice, softly ringing the bell before each announcement, to gauge the acoustics of the square, mindful of the flow of air, the position of the sun, and the bustle of daily life. Ugh. As they prepared for their role, the crier would gather their materials. A stack of parchment, neatly folded and tied with a thin strand of twine, was kept in a leather satchel. Each sheet held carefully scribed notes, written in a legible hand, detailing the day's announcements. These notes were not simply hastily jotted down. Each word was chosen with intention, ensuring clarity and understanding among the listeners. The parchment was made from fine linen, soft to the touch, its texture inviting the crier to run their fingers across its surface. These notes would be secured in the satchel, placed beside a small inkwell filled with dark, rich ink made from soot and natural resins. The crier had learned the delicate balance of ink viscosity, ensuring it flowed smoothly from the quill, creating letters that were neither too bold nor too faint. Nya, nel, e, wa, e. As the crier stepped out into the square, they would take a moment to breathe deeply, inhaling the scents of the market. Fresh bread, ripe fruits, and the earthy aroma of herbs. This was a time to ground themselves, to harmonize with the rhythms of the town that surrounded them. The crier would then adjust their posture, standing tall yet relaxed, allowing the gentle breeze to caress their face. The announcement would begin with a gentle ringing of the bell, a sound that traveled through the air like warm honey. The crier would wait for the echoes to settle, listening for the subtle responses of the townsfolk as they turned their attention. It was a delicate dance, one that required both patience and practice. The crier would adjust their voice, modulating the volume and tone, so it flowed softly, yet resonated with clarity. Each announcement, whether it was about a market day, a local festival, or a simple reminder to bring in the harvest, was delivered with care. The crier understood the nuances of communication, the importance of pacing, and the weight of their words. They would often pause for a moment, allowing the information to sink in, giving listeners time to absorb and respond. When speaking about prices at the market, for example, the crier would recite them slowly, enunciating each figure carefully. Apples, 3 pence a dozen, and pears, 4 pence a dozen. Each price was pronounced with precision, ensuring that the townsfolk could calculate their purchases comfortably, without haste. The crier would articulate the details of each item, reminding listeners of the quality, the freshness, and the vendor's reputation. The apples are crisp, freshly harvested, from the orchard of Master Geoffrey. This not only informed the community, but also built trust among the vendors. The crier had a role in fostering relationships, creating a tapestry of interconnections within the town. As the day wore on and the sun began its descent, the crier would continue their rounds, moving from one location to another. Each stop was marked by familiar landmarks: the old oak tree at the center of the square, the fountain with water dancing gracefully, and the bakery, always filled with the comforting aroma of baked goods. At each location, the crier would repeat the essential news, smoothing the edges of communication, ensuring every listener felt included. The crier would take note of who was present, greeting them with a nod or a smile, weaving their presence into the fabric of the announcement. "Good afternoon, Agnes, and hello to you, Thomas." The warmth of these small gestures was not lost on the community. Every interaction was tenderly crafted, and the crier would find joy in the light banter that sometimes accompanied the announcements. This was not a time for loud proclamations. Rather, It was an exercise in shared understanding. Each laugh, each soft exchange, added to the gentle rhythm of the crier's work. In the quiet moments, after the announcements had been made, the crier would take the time to reflect. A brief pause to gather thoughts, to appreciate the simple beauty of connection and communication. The square would begin to quiet, the sounds of evening settling in as the townsfolk returned to their homes, carrying with them the day's news, delivered with care and consideration. The crier would return to their chair by the window, the gentle breeze now carrying the soothing notes of the night. They would rest, cherishing the stillness that enveloped the town. The day had been rich with stories, and the crier felt a sense of fulfillment. Each announcement had been a thread woven into the community's tapestry, a reminder of the importance of shared knowledge and gentle communication. As night descended, the crier would linger on memories of the day, the sounds of the bells softly echoing in their mind. They would reflect upon the volume regulation, the art of speaking not just with words, but with intention. Each announcement was a delicate balance, a skill honed over time, far from the notion of shouting to be heard. Not say, wow. With the moon casting a soft glow, the crier would settle further into their chair, allowing the drowsiness of the evening to envelop them. The rhythm of the day's work would gently lull them into a state of calm, the peaceful sounds of the town now replaced by a quiet stillness. Soon, the crier would drift off, dreaming of the stories yet to be told, the connections yet to be made, and the gentle art of the announcement, regulated with precision and care. In the quiet of the night, as the crier nestled deeper into their chair, thoughts began to flow like gentle water over smooth stones. Each detail of their day came to mind, a tapestry woven of sound and silence. The tools of their trade were humble, yet essential. A sturdy wooden stand, crafted from local oak, held the bell high, its brass surface gleaming softly in the moonlight. This bell, with its gentle resonance, was the heart of the crier's work. The crier would often inspect this bell, ensuring its position was just right, that it would catch the breeze and carry the sound to all corners of the town. They understood the importance of the bell's tone and volume, knowing that a too loud announcement might startle a passerby, while too soft a call could leave vital information unheard. To regulate this balance, the crier had a collection of tools. A small wooden block, called the volume gauge, was fashioned from the same oak as the stand. It had markings etched into its surface, indicating various levels of volume. The crier would run their fingers over these marks, consulting them before each announcement, a gentle reminder of the delicate art of their craft. Before each hour, the crier would prepare. They would take a deep breath, letting the air fill their lungs, and exhale slowly, releasing any tension. They would then select their parchment, thin yet durable, made from the bark of local trees. The parchment was a soft beige, ready to accept the ink from their quill with ease. The ink itself was a deep black, made from natural dyes, ensuring that each letter was crisp and clear for those who would later read it. As they prepared the announcement, they would dip the quill into the ink, ensuring the tip was coated just enough to glide smoothly across the parchment. Each stroke of the quill was deliberate, forming letters with care. They would write slowly and gently, knowing that the words would carry weight in the community. Once the announcement was prepared, the crier would consult their clock, a simple wooden timepiece that ticked softly in the background. The clock was fashioned with care, its hands moving steadily, marking the passage of time with gentle precision. The crier knew they had a brief window to make their announcements, typically set for the hour, allowing the townsfolk to expect news at regular intervals. The crier would stand by their stand, waiting patiently, their heart calm and steady. Thence, as the hour approached, the crier would focus on their breath, inhaling deeply, feeling the rhythm of their body align with the ticking of the clock. They would stand tall, ensuring their posture was open and welcoming, ready to share the news that connected the community. The bell would be rung gently, its sound echoing softly through the cobbled streets. Each ring was a cue, an invitation to listen. The crier would then begin their announcement, speaking in a tone measured and gentle, allowing their voice to carry just so. They would often picture the listeners, imagining them pausing, turning their ears toward the sound, ready to absorb the words that flowed forth. The volume would be adjusted not by shouting, but by the subtle changes in the angle of their head, the way they would lean slightly closer to the crowd. This was an art form, perfected over time, and practiced with every announcement. The crier would speak at a level that felt warm and embracing, each word chosen with care, ensuring that everyone could hear, yet feel at ease. Peace. The announcements varied from local market days to celebrations of harvest, reminders of community gatherings, and even news of arrivals and departures. Each message was delivered with a sense of purpose, a rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of the town. Wah. Why? After each announcement, the crier would pause, allowing the words to settle in the air, letting the listeners absorb the information. They would watch as faces turned, eyes glimmering with understanding. This was the moment they cherished most, the connection formed between themselves and their community. As the last echoes of their voice faded, the crier would lower their head slightly, a gentle nod of acknowledgement. They understood that this was not just a duty. It was a shared experience, a moment that bound them together, little by little. Each day, they would return to their stand, prepared to weave new threads into the fabric of daily life. After the announcements, the crier would gather their tools. The parchment would be carefully rolled and stored in a leather pouch, while the quill and ink would be stowed away neatly on a small shelf beside the stand. They had a specific place for each item, ensuring that everything was in order for the next day. The leather pouch, worn but sturdy, held not just parchment, but a collection of notes and memories. Each rolled announcement was tied with a simple piece of twine, a nod to the past, a reminder of the words spoken. The crier would often sit quietly, tracing their fingers over the twine, feeling the connection to the stories held within. As the day drew to a close, the crier would revisit the volume gauge, ensuring it was returned to its proper place. The markings were a testament to their dedication, a record of the levels they had maintained throughout the day. They would think of the delicate balance they had achieved, the adjustments made in real time, and the care taken with each word. The crier understood the significance of their role, the impact of sound in a world where communication was vital. They embraced the notion of volume regulation as more than just a task. It was a craft, a practice that required patience and mindfulness. Slow and gentle adjustments, little by little, brought harmony to the streets, ensuring that every voice was heard without overwhelming. In the stillness of the evening, the crier would often reflect on the beauty of these nuances, the small details that made their work so fulfilling. They would smile softly, knowing that in a world filled with noise, they were a keeper of quiet truths. With the moonlight, pouring through the window, casting gentle shadows. The crier felt a sense of peace wash over them. The day's work was done, and soon the soothing embrace of sleep would take hold. Each moment of reflection became a lullaby, soft and rhythmic, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. The art of volume regulation was not just a duty, but a cherished ritual, a gentle call to community, echoing softly in the night. Inini. As the sun began to rise, illuminating the cobblestone streets of the medieval town, the town crier would prepare for another day of announcements. The morning light filtered through the wooden shutters, casting soft patterns on the floor. The crier, dressed in a simple yet elegant attire, would select their tools with great care. A sturdy bell, crafted from brass, would be placed at their side, shining softly in the early light. This bell, with its gentle ring, served as both a tool and a signal, a way to gather the townsfolk's attention without overwhelming their senses. The crier's voice was their most important instrument, and they understood the need for warmth and clarity. To maintain this delicate balance, the crier would often sip a warm herbal tea, perhaps chamomile or peppermint, soothing the throat. Each sip was deliberate, a slow embrace of warmth, preparing their vocal cords for the day's work ahead. Once the crier had finished their tea, they would move to the town square, where echoes of yesterday still lingered in the air. Arriving at the square, they would take a moment to survey the area, noting where the townsfolk gathered. Some were at the marketplace, others by the fountain, all waiting for the familiar sound of their voice. The crier would stand in the center, choosing their spot with care, ensuring that each corner of the square could receive the news equally. Before beginning, the crier would pause, allowing the anticipation to build gently. They would rise to their feet, placing one hand firmly on the bell, the other poised to speak. With a soft breath, the crier would begin. Hear ye, hear ye? A gentle intonation carrying through the air, calling for attention. The phrase, repeated often, created a familiar rhythm, a soothing incantation that drew the community closer together. The volume level was crucial. Too loud, and the message would overwhelm. Too soft, and the message would be lost. The crier, ever mindful, adjusted their stance, leaning slightly forward, allowing the sound to travel. Their voice, steady and calm, would rise and fall like the gentle waves of a tranquil sea. The crier's announcements would cover various topics, from local events to town decisions, and even messages from distant lands. Each subject required its own careful modulation. For instance, when announcing a festival, the crier would employ a brighter tone, ensuring excitement permeated the air without causing alarm. In contrast, when delivering news of a town meeting, the tone would soften, inviting a sense of unity and calm amongst the townsfolk. As the crier spoke, they would often look to the crowd, gauging reactions. A nod here, a smile there, small gestures that reassured them they were heard. The crier took note, adjusting their volume ever so slightly, ensuring that no one felt left out. This dance of sound was a craft honed over many years, every gesture and tone practiced with intent. After each announcement, the crier would ring the bell again, a clear signal that the news had concluded. This ringing served as both a marker of time and a gentle reminder for the townsfolk to absorb what they had just heard. The bell rang softly, resonating within the hearts of those gathered, an echo of community spirit. In the pauses between announcements, the crier would often reflect on the day's schedule. They would consult a small notebook, leather-bound and worn, filled with notes and reminders. Each page held the essence of the town's rhythm, from market days to the arrival of new merchants. The notebook was not merely a collection of tasks. It was a map of connections, a guide to the town's ebb and flow. The crier would trace the lines with a fingertip, feeling the weight of responsibility intertwined with the beauty of their role. Storage of the notes was equally important. The crier kept the notebook in a small satchel, made of sturdy fabric, secured with a leather strap. This satchel, worn across their shoulder, kept the notes safe from the elements. It was a practical choice, designed for ease of movement, allowing the crier to glide through the streets seamlessly. As the day unfolded, the crier would frequently check the time, ensuring they maintained a consistent schedule. The townsfolk relied on the crier as a source of regularity within their busy lives. The timing of announcements was just as crucial as the content. The crier knew that announcing at noon, when many were enjoying their meals, would reach the largest audience. They would often glance at the sun, its position in the sky guiding their timing. With each passing hour, the crier would adjust, preparing for the next round of news. Little by little, they became attuned to the rhythms of the day. The sounds of laughter, the clattering of carts, all blending into a symphony that underscored their work. Yeah. When the sun began to set, casting golden hues across the square, the crier knew that their day was drawing to a close. This time of day was cherished, a moment to reflect on the connections fostered through sound. As the light faded, the crier would often share reminders, not just of events, but of kindness and community. "Remember to check on your neighbors," they would say softly, their voice wrapping around the gathered crowd like a gentle embrace. "I'm okay." The volume would lower further, the tone shifting to one of comfort. It was during these moments that the crier felt most at peace, knowing they were not just sharing news, but fostering a sense of belonging. Each word, carefully chosen, resonated within the hearts of the townsfolk, knitting them closer together. War. Oh. As evening settled in, and the warmth of the day gave way to coolness, the crier would gather their belongings, taking a moment to appreciate the lightness of the satchel across their shoulder. The bell, now silent, would be tucked away, the brass polished and shining, waiting for another day of gentle declarations. With each step back home, the crier carried the echoes of the day, knowing they had fulfilled their role with grace and care. In the quiet of their room, they would unwind, reflecting on the day's rhythm, the gentle ebb and flow of their work. The satisfaction of a job well done enveloped them, and the crier would settle into their chair, allowing their thoughts to drift softly like clouds across a tranquil sky. The art of volume regulation had become a cherished part of their very being. Each whisper, each shout was a story told, a moment shared, and the crier held these stories close, like treasures to be savored in the stillness of the night. Slowly and gently, the day melted away, leaving behind the sweet embrace of peace and slumber. And us, I know. As the criers settled into the gentle rhythms of their evening, it was time to reflect on the tools of their trade. Each item held significance, a purpose in the delicate balance between volume and clarity. The bell, although silent now, had been a crucial instrument. Crafted with care, it had a diameter of approximately 6 inches, allowing its tone to resonate across the cobblestone streets. This bell was not merely an accessory. It was a communicator, a herald of news, and a guide for the townsfolk to gather. The crier would take great care to ensure the bell was kept in pristine condition. Every week, with a soft cloth soaked in a mixture of vinegar and water, they would polish the brass until it gleamed, reflecting the faintest glow of the evening light. Slowly and gently, they would wipe away the dust, taking time to appreciate the craftsmanship that went into its making. The bell was often adorned with intricate designs, depicting symbols of the town, a reminder of their shared identity. And, beside the bell, the crier maintained a collection of scrolls and parchment. Each scroll contained news, events, and announcements, meticulously written in ink made from soot and water. The ink would dry to a deep black, bold enough to capture the attention of passers-by. The parchment, often aged and slightly yellowed, was stored in a leather satchel, carefully organized by date and importance. The satchel itself was made of sturdy leather, the kind that would withstand the wear of daily travels. It had been handmade by a local artisan, who used a technique passed down through generations. Each stitch was a testament to skill, and each fold was intended to protect the precious news within. The crier would frequently check the satchel, ensuring that the scrolls were kept dry and free from the elements, for the integrity of the news depended on it. When the crier approached the town square, they would take a moment to observe the surroundings. The square was a hub of activity, where merchants lined the edges with their wares. Each merchant had their own rhythm, their voices blending into a soft hum that filled the air. The crier understood the importance of timing. They would wait for a lull in the noise, a moment when the chatter subsided, allowing for their voice to rise above the sounds of the marketplace. The act of announcing news required a careful balance, a harmony between volume and clarity. The crier would breathe deeply, feeling the cool air fill their lungs, preparing their voice. There was an unspoken etiquette among the townsfolk. They expected the crier to be neither too loud nor too soft, a sweet spot that allowed the news to carry without overwhelming the listeners. To achieve this, the crier would begin with a soft tone, gradually increasing volume as needed. They employed a technique known as the crescendo of announcement. This method involved starting at a gentle level and allowing their voice to swell with each word, capturing the attention of those nearby. The crier would often practice this in the solitude of their home, standing before a mirror, allowing their voice to fill the empty space, reflecting on each syllable as if it were a note in a symphony. Wah! As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm, golden light across the square, the crier would prepare for their first announcement of the evening. They would select a scroll from their satchel, carefully unfurling it to reveal the contents. The announcement, written in elegant script, detailed the upcoming market day, a cherished event that brought the community together. To ensure clarity, the crier would practice the announcement in their mind, visualizing the faces of the townsfolk as they listened intently. Each phrase was repeated softly, allowing the crier to gauge the volume, ensuring it was just right. The words danced in their mind. Hear ye, hear ye. This familiar phrase, a gentle invitation, would be the gateway to the news. With the scroll firmly in hand, they stepped into the square, the light of dusk wrapping around them like a soft blanket. The townsfolk began to gather, drawn by the familiar sound of the bell ringing gently in the distance. The crier raised their hand, signaling for attention, and the townspeople turned, their faces illuminated by the fading light. The first words slipped from their lips, a soft cascade of sound that flowed over the crowd. Hear ye, hear ye. The volume was measured, just loud enough to carry over the gentle murmur of conversation. Each word was enunciated clearly, allowing the crier to maintain the delicate balance of volume and meaning. Mendo. As the announcement unfolded, the crier would occasionally glance at the gathered crowd, observing their reactions. Were they leaning in, eager to hear more? Or were they standing back, perhaps distracted by other thoughts? This feedback was invaluable, guiding the crier in making subtle adjustments to their volume. If faces appeared confused or disengaged, the crier would lower their voice slightly, inviting listeners to draw closer. Yindime, care. On the other hand, if excitement began to ripple through the crowd, the crier would allow their voice to rise, embracing the energy of the moment. The dance of sound and silence was a delicate one, a thread spun between the crier and the community. Mm. As the evening progressed, the crier would continue to make announcements on various topics. Celebrations, local events, and reminders of town meetings. Each was delivered with the same care, always mindful of the volume, always striving to connect. An important point indeed was that the crier would never raise their voice in anger or frustration. The role demanded a calm demeanor, a gentle touch that soothed rather than startled. Yo. After the announcements were complete, the crier would take a moment to listen to the reactions of the townsfolk. Often there would be soft chatter, laughter, and the pleasant sounds of a community engaged. This feedback was a soft reward, a reminder that their effort to regulate volume had borne fruit. As the night deepened, the crier would make their way back home, the satchel swaying gently by their side. Each step was slow and deliberate, a reflection of the day's accomplishments. They would think back on the announcements, the careful modulation of their voice, and the warmth of connection shared with the townsfolk. With a soft sigh, they settled into their evening routine. The tools of their trade would be cleaned and stored, the bell polished, the scrolls neatly rolled and tucked away. Each item had its place, each piece of the crier's world, a reminder of the delicate balance between noise and silence, between shouting and whispering. And so, the crier would close their eyes, allowing the soft sounds of the night to envelop them. Slow and gentle, they would drift into a peaceful slumber, the echoes of the day fading away, replaced by the soothing rhythm of their own breath. As the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the world in a soft twilight glow, the town crier settled into the familiar rhythm of their evening. The tools of their trade awaited, resting upon a sturdy table crafted from oak. This table, worn and polished through years of use, held a collection of items essential to the crier's duties. The bell, a delicate yet robust piece of brass, gleamed in the fading light. It was a simple bell, about 6 inches in diameter, with a smooth surface that reflected a gentle sheen. The crier took a moment to appreciate its weight, feeling the cool metal in their palm. This bell was not merely an object. It was a symbol of their responsibility to the community. They would grasp it firmly, feeling the contours beneath their fingers, ensuring it was ready for the next day's announcements. With care, they would take a soft cloth, slightly dampened with water, and begin to polish it gently. Each stroke was slow, deliberate, and calming. The rhythm of the polishing mimicked the rhythm of their breath, in and out, slow and steady. The crier would then gather the scrolls, each one a carefully crafted announcement. The parchment was of fine quality, made from linen fibers, smooth to the touch and ideal for ink. The ink itself was a deep black, made from soot mixed with a binding agent, ensuring clarity and permanence. Each scroll was approximately 10 inches wide and rolled tightly, secured by a simple string made from natural fibers, allowing ease of transport. As the crier unrolled the first scroll, they would take a moment to admire the neatness of the handwriting. Each letter was formed with care, a clear and elegant script that spoke of their diligence. The ink had dried perfectly, leaving a slight sheen that caught the last glimmers of light. They would read the contents softly, savoring the familiar phrases, the news that would soon be shared. It was a comforting routine, this reading, this preparation for another day of connection with the townsfolk. Next came the satchel, a well-loved companion of worn leather, rich in texture and scent. It had been crafted by a local artisan, bearing the marks of time and use. This satchel was wide enough to hold several scrolls, yet compact enough to rest comfortably against the body. The crier would inspect the satchel carefully, ensuring the straps were intact and the seams secure. They would take a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship, feeling the leather beneath their fingers, noting the small nicks and scratches that told stories of years gone by. Nay, with the tools organized and ready, the crier would check the schedule for the following day. They would refer to a simple, hand-drawn calendar, meticulously maintained. Each day was marked with notes, important happenings, birthdays, local events, and the occasional reminder of festivals. The calendar was an essential part of the crier's preparations, guiding them in the timing of announcements. It was customary to announce news at dawn, as the sun began to rise, and again at dusk, as the day cooled into evening. The crier would adjust the timing for each announcement based on the season, the town's rhythm, and the presence of townsfolk. A careful eye on the weather would inform them if a louder voice was necessary, if the wind would carry their words, or if a softer tone would be more appropriate. They understood the nuances of their role, the importance of clarity and volume, though they approached it all with a mindful calmness. As the evening settled deeper, the crier would take a moment to reflect on the etiquette that governed their profession. It was customary to greet townsfolk warmly, to engage in soft conversation before delivering news. This small exchange, this gentle interaction, helped to establish a sense of community and trust. The crier had learned over time to listen, to observe the expressions of those around them. Each interaction would be brief, a smile here, a nod there, the soft rhythm of daily life playing in the background. They understood that their words held weight, and thus they approached their duty with reverence. The tone of their voice, the timbre, and the volume were all carefully calibrated. Too loud, and they risked startling the townsfolk. Too soft, and their message would be lost. It was a delicate balance, this modulation of sound. The crier would practice their announcements softly, enunciating each word with precision. They would stand in front of a mirror, observing their own reflection, noting how the lines of their face softened as they spoke. Each rehearsed phrase rolled off their tongue gently, as though they were caressing the very air around them. In that quiet space, they would breathe in deeply, allowing the calmness to fill their lungs, exhaling slowly, releasing any tension. Preparing for the next day was not merely a task. It was a ritual. The crier would lay out their attire, selecting a simple tunic made from wool, dyed in muted colors that blended harmoniously with the town's landscape. The tunic was tailored to allow ease of movement, the sleeves slightly loose, and the hem falling just below the knees. Comfort was key, for they would spend hours on their feet, walking the cobbled streets, sharing news with the community. As the crier dressed, they would focus on the feel of the fabric against their skin, the gentle warmth of the wool. There was a sense of security in the familiar routine, a soothing embrace that wrapped around them like a favorite blanket. Each button was fastened with care, each fold smoothed out gently, preparing their mind and body for the day ahead. Uh, Once dressed, the crier would return to their tools, ensuring everything was in its rightful place. The bell would be nestled securely in the satchel, the scrolls carefully rolled and tucked beside it. The satchel itself would be slung across the shoulder, the weight comforting and familiar. They would take a moment to appreciate the simplicity of this preparation, the uncomplicated joy of their role in the community. And as the evening continued to unfold, the crier would take one last look around their modest home. The low light cast gentle shadows, creating a cocoon of warmth. With a soft sigh, they would settle into their chair, allowing the day's thoughts to drift away. The preparations, the rituals, the gentle ebb and flow of their responsibilities all melded together, creating a serene tapestry of life in a medieval town. Softly, they would close their eyes, allowing the sounds of the world outside to fade into a gentle hum, replaced by the comforting rhythm of their own breath. Slow and gentle, they would drift into a peaceful slumber, the echoes of preparation and routine wrapping around them like a lullaby. The next day would dawn in a quiet manner, the sun casting soft rays of light through the window, illuminating the serene space around the crier. As the first hints of morning light began to filter in, the crier would rise from their slumber, their body gently stretching and awakening with the day's promise. With each small movement, the crier would feel the weight of the satchel resting beside their bed, a subtle reminder of their duties awaiting them. They would gather their thoughts slowly, preparing for the day that lay ahead. The crier would step upon the cool, worn stone floor, savoring the sensation beneath their feet. A soft, rhythmic patter would accompany their steps to the hearth, where a gentle fire would be crackling, offering warmth and comfort. The crier would kneel down, carefully stoking the embers, ensuring the flickering flames danced with life. Once the fire was strong, they would move to the small table, where a simple breakfast awaited. A bowl of porridge, steaming and inviting, would be the first meal of the day. The crier would take a moment to savor each spoonful, the warm oats filling their belly, preparing them for the work that lay ahead. The simple act of eating, of nourishing the body, would be a grounding experience, a moment of tranquility before the day's responsibilities would unfold. After breakfast, the crier would begin the gentle process of dressing for the day. They would select a sturdy tunic, woven from wool, the fabric soft yet resilient against the morning chill. The tunic would be fastened with a leather belt, cinched just enough to provide comfort without restricting movement. With every motion, they would feel the fabric against their skin, embracing the familiar sensation that accompanied their role. Next, the crier would retrieve their tools, a collection of instruments vital for their duties. The bell, a small but resonant instrument, would be the first to be examined. It was crafted of bronze, polished and shining, the surface gleaming softly in the morning light. They would hold the bell in their hands, feeling its weight, appreciating the craftsmanship. It was not merely a tool, but a symbol of their purpose. Beside the bell, the crier would carefully sort through the scrolls, each one meticulously rolled and tied with a thin piece of twine. The scrolls contained the news of the day, carefully penned in clear, legible script. Each scroll was a vital connection to the townspeople, a bridge between events and the ears of those who would listen. The crier would check the ink, ensuring it had dried fully before rolling the scrolls. As they prepared the scrolls, they would take a moment to reflect on the importance of each word, the significance of each announcement. With a gentle touch, they would tuck the scrolls into the satchel, ensuring they were secure yet easily accessible. The satchel, made of soft leather, would cradle the scrolls and bell as they would set out into the world, ready to share the day's tidings. Nay, once the tools were organized, the crier would step outside, taking a moment to breathe in the crisp morning air. They would find a moment of stillness, allowing their senses to fully awaken. The sounds of the town would begin to emerge, the distant clattering of carts, the soft murmur of voices, and the gentle rustle of leaves. Each sound would blend together, creating an unhurried symphony of daily life. As the sun climbed higher, the crier would begin their journey through the winding streets of the town. The path would be familiar, a well-trodden route filled with memories and moments shared. They would pass quaint homes, each with their own story, their own rhythm. The crier would nod to familiar faces, exchanging quiet greetings, each acknowledgement a thread woven into the fabric of community. The crier's steps would be deliberate, each footfall echoing softly against the cobblestones. The satchel would bounce gently against their side, a constant companion. As they walked, the crier would prepare their voice, gently humming a soft tune, a melody that would guide them through the day's proclamations. This simple act of vocal warm-up would help to regulate their volume, ensuring that the announcements would carry just enough to be heard without overwhelming the listener. Upon arriving at the town square, the crier would pause, taking in the scene before them. The square would be a hub of activity, with townsfolk bustling about, engaged in their daily routines. The crier would find their place, standing on a low stone platform, elevated just enough to be seen and heard. With a deep breath, they would select a scroll from the satchel and prepare to announce the news. Before launching into the day's declarations, the crier would observe the crowd, gauging their attentiveness. They would begin softly, allowing their voice to carry gently across the square. The tone would be measured, each word pronounced clearly, carefully chosen for its clarity and impact. They would begin with the local market news, detailing the arrival of fresh produce, the prices of goods, and any special events planned for the day. As they spoke, the crier would adjust their volume, ensuring it was neither too loud nor too soft. They understood the importance of regulation, the delicate balance of being heard without causing discomfort. Slowly and gently, they would modulate their voice, allowing the townsfolk to absorb the information at their own pace. The crier would take note of the reactions from the crowd, watching as listeners leaned in, nodding in acknowledgement. Each response would guide their approach, reinforcing the importance of maintaining a soothing cadence. With each announcement, the crier would draw from their well of experience, recalling past gatherings and the lessons learned from each one. After sharing the news, the crier would conclude with a gentle reminder for the townsfolk to support their local merchants, fostering a sense of community and shared responsibility. They would watch as the townspeople moved about, conversations sparking amongst friends and neighbors. Once the announcements were complete, the crier would take a moment to absorb the atmosphere, the vibrant life of the town continuing around them. The sense of fulfillment would wash over them, the knowledge that they played a small yet vital role in connecting the community through shared information. With the day's work laid before them, the crier would gather the remaining scrolls, tucking them carefully back into the satchel. They would take a final glance at the bustling square, appreciating the quiet moments amidst the lively exchanges. And slowly, they would make their way back along the familiar path, allowing the rhythm of the town to lull them into a state of calm reflection. As the sun began its descent, casting a soft golden hue over the town, the crier would feel a gentle fatigue settle over them. The day's responsibilities, the careful balance of volume and clarity, the connection with the townsfolk, all these elements would weave together into a comforting tapestry of purpose and belonging. As the town crier walked back along the cobbled streets, the sounds of the town faded into a gentle hum. The evening air was cool and refreshing, a soft breeze caressing their face. Their mind drifted back to the tools of their trade, the instruments that aided them in this daily ritual of communication. Each morning, before the sun had fully risen, the crier would begin their preparations. They would gather their supplies, laying them out with care on a sturdy wooden table. The table was worn but sturdy, its surface marked by years of use. They would reach for the scrolls, each one carefully rolled and tied with a thin length of twine. The scrolls were made from parchment, a delicate material, soft to the touch yet resilient enough to withstand the rigors of daily announcements. The crier would unroll a scroll, taking a moment to admire the careful script that adorned it. The ink was dark and rich, the letters flowing smoothly across the page. Each word was a carefully chosen declaration, a piece of news meant to inform the townspeople. They would take a deep breath, inhaling the faint scent of the ink as they prepared to voice the words aloud. Next came the horn, a brass instrument polished to a bright sheen, its surface glinting in the soft light. The crier would hold it in their hands, feeling its weight and the coolness of the metal. The horn had a specific purpose, to signal the beginning of each announcement, a gentle call that would draw the attention of the townsfolk. The crier would practice a few soft notes, ensuring that the sound was neither too harsh nor too soft, but just right to resonate through the square. The volume was crucial. A crier would often recall the advice passed down through generations. The voice should carry, but not overwhelm. The ideal decibel level was often compared to the sound of a gentle stream flowing over smooth stones, audible yet soothing. Each morning, they would spend a few moments finding their own voice, adjusting the pitch and tone until it felt comfortable and natural. The crier would also consider their posture, standing tall yet relaxed, shoulders rolled back, head held high, projecting confidence and clarity. This was not just about volume, but also about presence. The crier understood that their body language communicated just as much as the words they spoke. Once the preparations were complete, the crier would step outside into the awakening town. They would walk to their designated spot, a small platform near the center of the square, a place where they could be seen and heard by all. Each step was measured, the cobblestones beneath their feet familiar and comforting. The crier would glance around, noting the faces of early risers, shopkeepers opening their doors, and children beginning to stir. And always he always, oh, I know. Sure, in Paris. The timing of the announcements was also significant. The crier would wait until the hour hand on the clock tower pointed precisely to the hour. Each announcement was a ritual, a moment of pause in the daily rhythm of life. During this time, the crier would take a deep breath, feeling the anticipation build within them. As the bells chimed, the crier would raise the horn to their lips, letting out a soft, yet clear note. This was the sound that signaled the start of the day's proclamations. With the townspeople's attention drawn, the crier would unfurl the first scroll, their eyes scanning the neatly written lines. The first announcement might inform of market days, the arrival of goods, or the scheduling of town meetings. Each announcement followed a gentle rhythm, a steady flow of information delivered at a measured pace. The crier would pause between sentences, allowing the townsfolk time to absorb the details, time to discuss amongst themselves. This was not merely a task. It was a connection, a sharing of knowledge that fostered a sense of community. The crier understood the significance of their role, a bridge between the events of the day and the lives of the townspeople. After each announcement, a soft silence would envelop the square. The crier would take a moment to gather their thoughts, to prepare for the next scroll. The weight of the horn felt familiar in their hands, a reassuring presence as they continued. Panau, Panise. With each proclamation, they would be mindful of the volume, ensuring that it remained at that gentle level, reminiscent of a whisper shared between close friends. They knew that shouting would only drive the townsfolk away, while a soft voice would draw them in, creating a space for shared experience and understanding. As the crier continued through the scrolls, they would occasionally glance up, observing the responses of the crowd. Some faces would light up with recognition, others would furrow in concentration, processing the information. This feedback was important. It guided the crier's pace, tone, and volume. They would adjust, modulating their voice as necessary, a dance of sound and silence, ebbing and flowing like the tide. They would also remember the etiquette of their position. They would always begin with a courteous nod to the audience, a gesture of respect, acknowledging the townspeople as they commenced with the announcements. It was a small but significant detail, one that reinforced the bond between the crier and the community. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the air warmed, and the sounds of the town grew busier. The crier would often lose track of time, becoming absorbed in the rhythm of their duties. They would occasionally consult the small pocket watch they carried, its brass casing worn but functional. Timekeeping was a crucial component of their role, ensuring that announcements were made at appropriate intervals throughout the day. After several scrolls had been read, the crier would take a moment to rest, allowing their voice to recover. They would sip from a small flask of water, the cool liquid refreshing against their throat. This brief respite was essential. It provided an opportunity to reflect on the importance of moderation in all things, including their own vocal delivery. At this point in the day, the crier might consider the local shops beginning to open, the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. The baker, with flour dusting their apron, would wave a hand in greeting, a familiar exchange that brought warmth to the crier's heart. Little by little, the crier would feel the energy of the community envelop them, a comforting embrace that fueled their spirit. The final scroll of the morning would often be the most anticipated. It might announce festive events, such as the upcoming Harvest Festival or the annual fair. With this announcement, the crier would take special care to emphasize the details, the dates, times, and locations, ensuring that no one would miss out on the joy of community gatherings. Nindandao, Atfo, Has, She, Irwamo, Chihai. As the crier spoke, they would visualize the townsfolk preparing for these events, children laughing, families gathering, and friends sharing meals. They could almost hear the distant echoes of music and see the colorful banners fluttering in the wind. This shared anticipation filled the square with an air of excitement, even as the crier maintained their soothing tone, gently guiding the townsfolk with each word. In this way, the morning would flow, a seamless blend of announcements and community engagement. Each crier's voice was unique, yet they all shared the same goal: to connect, to inform, and to serve the town with their gentle proclamations. Aya, wa, ye. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the square, the crier would feel the satisfaction of a job well done. They would take a step back, allowing the townspeople to engage with one another, to share in the news and the connections formed through these simple yet profound exchanges. And so, with a heart full of purpose, the crier would linger for a moment longer, watching the life of the town unfold around them, before finally gathering their scrolls and horn, ready to retreat into the gentle rhythms of the day. Oh, oh. In today's gentle exploration, we have slowly wandered through the muted world of medieval town criers, considering the delicate balance of their volume regulation. We have uncovered the intricacies of how these keepers of the peace carefully adjusted their voices, ensuring that news reached the ears of townsfolk without causing alarm or disturbance. Each decibel was measured with purpose, and each announcement was a dance of sound, a soothing hum in the rhythm of daily life. As we envision the tranquil scene of a quiet room bathed in soft night light, we can almost hear the calm whispers of the past. The air is still, your body is resting, and the worries of the day are fading into the gentle embrace of sleep. Hi. If this quiet journey through history has brought you some comfort, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. And remember to turn on loop, so the soothing sounds can carry you gently into the night once more.